Now, Daniel and Millie in the last story had gotten Daniel had gotten kicked out of his home and out of his clan and was told to leave by the leader of the group. So him and Millie flew off for a while, and then they came to Dragon's place. Now, Dragon was a warrior. He taught warriors. He was a member of the warrior clan of the dragons, and his job was to teach dragons how to be great, great fighters. Now, Daniel, coming from what was supposed to be the destroyer clan, should have been a great fighter, but we know Daniel just that that wasn't him. He just didn't see that. But he sat there and he went to Dragons and said, "Okay, teach me how to be a warrior." And Dragon kind of looked at him and said, "Well, yeah, you're big enough, and you got a princess with you? Ain't nobody captured a princess in years. And you did it? Maybe you got something here that we can work with." So they stayed for a while, and Dragon sat there and taught Daniel all kinds of tricks, and he also taught Millie how to fight because he had some human servants there, and they taught Millie how to fight. So the two of them stayed there for a couple of months, and while they were there, he met Sarah. Now, Sarah was a blue sea dragon, and Sarah was fast. She had two swords that she carried, and she was just the prettiest thing that Daniel had ever seen. But she was also a vicious, vicious fighter. So after a while, Daniel and Millie said, we got to go look at some other stuff. So they said bye for a while and they left and they went to the forest lands and they hung out there for a while and explored the forest and the trees. And after a while, Millie said, "Well, I guess we got to go back to the desert lands and see my father and just see what's going on there." And of course, Daniel said, "Okay, I kidnapped the princess. I'm going to sit there and get a ransom back for, bringing her back." Not that he really wanted to bring her back. He was getting kind of attached to her, but he decided, well, okay, we'll see what happens. So they go back to the desert lands and they find out that Millie has a sister who's not been a nice person right now, and Millie's daddy, who is King Theodore, is still trying to marry the princess off on, for political and economic gain. Hey, get this, kick her to the curb, marry her, try and get something out of it anyway. My daughter, my princess, I can get rid of her and sell her and do all kinds of things. Well, Millie wasn't into that. Millie had done found herself a prince that she had met years ago. Wasn't sure he even still knew who she was, but she had met Prince John, and he was from the islands. They had been childhood friends, and then John had to go back to the islands, and Millie had stayed in the desert. Two totally, totally different areas, but it is what it is. And when Millie's dad, hey, she's back. Nope, I'm going to sell her and I'm going to do this. And Daniel said, this, no. I was looking for a ransom, but I'm not going to. I'm not going to turn her into this. I'm not going to do this to her. So they left rather hastily, and they flew around. And they flew out to the islands, and they said, "Well, we'll sit there and find this Prince John and see if Prince John is, still around, still kicking, and see if there's still something between the two of them. If not, well, they'll go find somewhere else. They didn't really have anything else to do as they both been kicked out of their houses. So they flew to the Emerald Isles, and it was a long, long flight. And they're trying to figure out how to get there because it's like, you get to the coast, and then you got this long flight, and they're trying to figure out how do we fly across this long ocean. And after a while talking to some people, they found a couple people said, well, there's some maps and some ways you can do it, and they were able to get a hold of Siegfried, and Siegfried, well, kind of a crooky pirate, mappy maker, smuggler type, just all in all, good guy. But he sold him a map. He said, if you do this, these are these little islands and rocks where you can fly and stop and rest and fly and stop and rest. And after 2-3 days, you can get to the Emerald Isles over the sea, hopefully without crashing into the sea and drowning. There were sea dragons and sea monsters and things like that. You know, you land in my ocean, I eat you. No problem. You're not one of mine. You lunch. So they started flying across the ocean, and they found a couple of these islands where they landed and they rested. And they found out that Millie could sit inside Daniel's mouth and hide. He's a big dragon. She wasn't that big. She could hide in there, stay warm, stay out of the weather, stay hidden. So, nobody knew he was dragging around the princess. And they stopped, and it was about their third day, and they had landed on this little outcropping of rock that, about that big, just big enough for the dragon to land on and take a breath and relax and realize, I just can't fly this much further. I got to take a break. Well, they heard some noises and they heard some sound, and they thought, okay, sea dragon, sea monster, something like that. They weren't sure, but they were hearing something and decided that, let's see what's going on here. And then they saw a sea dragon. Now, sea dragons, they don't fly too well. They can fly, but it's not their big forte. They prefer to live in the ocean and swim in herds and just go about their business swimming and things like that. And storm had come up, and Daniel was, this tide's coming up, the island's going away. What do we do next? So they decided it was time for them to start flying. Well, the weather got too bad, and Daniel crashed into the water. And they're in the water, and Daniel said, well, I guess I could try to swim. Didn't know if he really could swim, but now he knew he couldn't fly. And he started swimming, and then all bunch of sea dragons started coming around him. And he thought that there was going to be a problem. And then one of the sea dragons came up, kind of sniffed around at him, and said, You, we recognize. You are part of us. Now, Daniel's thinking like, what you mean, me part of you? I'm from the Destroyer clan up on, the Brown Mountains. I got nothing to do with sea dragons. But the sea dragon was, no, there's something here. There's something sea dragony about you. Sea dragony. Huh, okay, well, that's a new one. And a couple more sea dragons came up and said, well, yeah, you got that sea dragon scent, and the way you swim is kind of like a sea dragon, and yeah, you're kind of sea dragony. Even with your brown color and supposedly destroyer clan, you're kind of something says sea dragon about you. Okay, I'm not buying this, but okay. And they got to swimming for a while, and then a big pod came up, bunch of sea dragons, and an old female sea dragon came up and started smelling and said, "Daniel, yeah, I am your mother." What? What do you mean you're my mother? No, my mother was Shirley. She was a sea dragon. She was a destroyer dragon, and said, "No, your father was George." Um, but many years ago, uh, George was out just being George, doing dragon things, and met up with a flock of sea dragons, and they became friends. And well, George had himself a girlfriend, and his girlfriend, after a while, um, delivered an egg, and George found out about it and went and stole the egg from Sophia, who was the mother, and took it back to his clan because he was the father. Now, Shirley wasn't happy, and his brother, Glenn, wasn't happy. So that's kind of why Daniel was never really accepted by his mother and by his brother and by some of the other members of the Destroyer clan, because he was only half Destroyer clan. His other half was Dragon, was Sea Dragon, because of the little girlfriend affair that George had in his younger, wilder days. But he kidnapped it, and nobody bothered to tell Daniel that he wasn't a full blooded destroyer that he always expected. He always thought he was, which would lead to some of the ways that, he didn't fit in. He didn't feel like pillaging and destroying a lot of stuff. It's kind of understandable now because he really wasn't full blooded destroyer dragon. He was half destroyer and half sea dragon. So he talked to his mother and found out he had a sister named Sybil. And hey, they were getting along just fine for a while. And they said, we're going to have to get together and talk some more and see what's going on with each other. And the sea dragons helped Daniel learn how to swim and how to do a couple sea dragony things with some sonic booms for a weapon as opposed to just fire and claws. And they kind of like Millie too. Desert princess. Well, where'd you come from? And Daniel told her the story about how he kidnapped her or rescued her. Either way, either thing works. And well, they thought that was kind of pretty cool too, because again, nobody had kidnapped princesses in years. So yeah, that kind of made him pretty good deal with the sea dragons too. So after a couple of days there with the sea dragons and talking to his mother and his sister, and he met his grandparents and some other aunts and uncles and relatives who, even though different than what he was used to, were more accepting of him than the Destroyer clan was. And then he sat there and they said, well, look, I got to get Millie here to the Emerald Isles because we're trying to sit there and see if Prince John is still alive and kicking and, just see what's going on with him. So they pointed him in the right direction and showed him tricks to get there and taught him how to swim and swim underwater so that he didn't always have to fly over the ocean. He could swim and dive and do it that way and made things a lot easier to get across the ocean. So they got there and they got to the Emerald Isles, and while they were there, they found the castle and made quite a commotion when he lands outside the castle, and everybody's thinking, "Oh, dragon, not good. He going to eat us all." And no. Well, I'm brought Princess Millie here from the Desert Kingdom, and we're trying to see if Prince John is here, and she wants to talk to him and see what's going on, say hi, hey, long time no see, hey, I like you, you like me, what's going on? So the guards at the castle said, well, Prince John is still here. He is the acting king right now because his mother and father are real sick. Well, okay. Sorry to hear about that. And Prince John came out on his pretty horse and came out there, and he saw Princess Millie, and yeah, he still had a thing for her somewhere in his heart. He said, "Ooh, Princess Millie, long time no see. Yeah, I kind of like you. Yeah, let's talk, see what's going on." So Millie stayed in the castle for a couple of days, talking to Prince John and you know the advisors, seeing what's going on with the king and the queen and everything like that. And Daniel decided to fly around the islands for a little bit, just sit there and see what was going on. He was pretty sure that Millie was going to be safe, and if he needed help, he'd go, eat a couple people and do what he had to do to get her back. And while he was there, he found the cave of the blue dragons, and he found his girlfriend's cave there. And ooh, hello, how are you? And they started talking and getting along with each other and seeing seeing how things were and seeing what's going on. And then they decided, well, let's go back and see what's going on with Millie and Prince John and the king and the queen and everything like that. So they went back to the castle and found out that king and queen had been poisoned by some nefarious type guy who was trying to bump off all the royals and assume command control of the islands. Well, what can we do about it? Well, they found out that there was a cure for the disease in the desert lands. So Millie and John and Daniel and Sophia all went back to the desert lands to find Mohab, the merchant who was supposed to be able to find the cure for this disease. And they went back across the sea and they learned how to get across the sea. And with the sea dragon's help, with Daniel's mother and father's help and grandfather's help, they were able to get across the sea and get back to Mohab and say, we need the cure for this disease that some nefarious crook gave the king and queen of the Emerald Isles. Well, Mohab said, well, yeah, I get you that. That's no problem. But there's a cost. There is a catch to that. See, it's kept in these caves, and these caves are guarded by critters, and, well, somebody's got to deal with the critters and the magic and the bad guys there. And once you get these critters done, you can have the cure and you can go back, cure the king and queen, and just do what you need to do to make everybody happy. So they thought about it and said, all right, we'll get into these caves and we'll find the cure and we'll get rid of all these critters and everything like that. So getting rid of the critters and getting the cure and going back is the next story.